Good morning, my friends. This is Paul. And today, or rather yesterday, since it just turned midnight a minute ago, I beat Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia with the two appropriate amiibos, mind you. And I wanted to talk all about it. So, one of the first things that immediately comes to mind from a Fire Emblem veteran fan's perspective is that the game is a very contradictory experiences. In many ways, it feels like they've taken a step backward from the Fire Emblem formula, but in many other ways, they've improved it. And even though I'm normally one for pointing out contradictions, as evidenced by my obvious Ace Attorney fanboyism, but this is actually a good thing in the case of Echoes, because even though it's technically a remake of an old Famicom game called Fire Emblem Gaiden, which only came out in Japan, for us Americans this is all new. The only exposition we would have had to the characters of Alm and Celica are in Fire Emblem Awakening's DLC. So, I'm going to be treating the game as it's a brand new game as opposed to a remake. So first off, most of what you love about Fire Emblem is preserved here. Turn-based battles that are on a grid where you take turns moving your units and then the enemies take their turns. The inventory has been extremely streamlined so that you only carry one thing at a time and micromanagement doesn't even feel needed. It may seem a bit off at first, but eventually it becomes so intuitive that you wonder how you could have ever gone back to the old system again. However, a few things have been shaken up a bit to refine the experience. One is that the partner system has been removed, which at first was a bit of a shock considering how well it worked in Awakening and Fates, but it also puts back that emphasis on sheer strategy, because the partner-up system in hindsight sounds like it relied a lot on dumb luck. Whereas you have to think about the individual placement and skills of your units. Another thing that's been slightly shaken up is that archers and healers are much more versatile, with healers having far more abilities and staves don't break anymore. It's all tied to their health bar now. And they can summon illusions, as well as archers being able to shoot from really, really far distances and being able to counterattack close up. So because you don't really get any unit in the game that I recall that can use an axe, this makes the archer basically like the warrior of this game. There are other subtle fixes to the core Fire Emblem gameplay, but let's talk about what's radically different. So first off, this is the first Fire Emblem game in North America to have dungeon crawling. You'll enter literal 3D spaces, and if you're playing on the new 3DS, you can use the little stub to move the camera, and you can break pots and boxes just like in a Zelda game to get money and resources. If you see an enemy, you can do a first strike on them, Paper Mario style, to initiate a turn-based battle. The dungeons themselves are somewhat unremarkable. They're pretty basic layouts, and they're nowhere near as complex as a Zelda dungeon. Only in the last one do you actually have to do a little bit of thinking just to get through, as there really aren't any block-pushing puzzles, just the occasional riddle or two that are really easy to solve. Also, there are towns, abandoned buildings that you can search for food particles in, as opposed to a bunch of shops scattered throughout the land, and you can even do side quests. The map system also returns from Awakening and Sacred Stones, allowing you to sort of move along this big grid and challenge enemy forces as they come. But the main hook of the game is that you're actually controlling two protagonists, Alm and Celica. They're not exactly against each other per se, but they just have different ways of pursuing their goals. So, one point of the game might focus you on Alm's point of view, then switch over to Celica. At some points you can choose which one you control, making this the most non-linear Fire Emblem game to date. If I had to compare it to anything, it would be the Zero Escape trilogy, especially Zero Time Dilemma, which you know I'm very much a fan of, so this change was much appreciated in this game. I do have to admit that I think they felt a little bit more biased toward Alm's side, as way too much of the game is devoted to his army, and Celica's felt like weaklings by the time I got to see them again. But still, it was nice that both of them had a unique cast of characters, and although this may seem like a detriment to some people, there aren't as many characters in this game as there are in other Fire Emblems, although it could just be that the characters are in their own separate armies and never have an opportunity to intersect. Except near the very end and the post-game content, which is another first for Fire Emblem. Production-wise, this game is solid, with the battles feeling more natural flowing with regards to how the players animate. There's more dialogue. Everything is fully voiced, save for the occasional, like, oh, it's a locked door type of dialogue. And the music is stunning. Not every piece is a hit, but this is overall one of the best examples of a soundtrack for a Fire Emblem game. And to think it's actually a remake of a chiptune soundtrack makes me even more impressed. Now, with regards to the DLC, because you know I always have to mention that in my reviews. As of the time of this review, not all of it has been released, but I have been able to play most of it. The only one I'm missing are the Cypher Legends pack. I would say that the DLC isn't nearly as necessary as it is in Fates, although it is helpful if you're at a weird point in the map where grinding for experience is hard, in which case the map Band Before Bandages is something that I would recommend. There are also 4 prequel chapters in the DLC that allow you to view the events of what happened before Almond Celica's adventure started, which is nice because it gives you control of one character that you can't get in the main game. And it also lets you know how the events transpired that eventually allowed Almond Celica to start out. So it gives you more backstory and whatnot, which is always nice. The characters are lovable and there's a lot of personality. And speaking of characters, I've heard that the Cypher pack allows you to get 4 more characters that were based on a Japanese trading card game that never came to the West. So get to see more Fire Emblem characters. And if that's not enough, you can scan a compatible Fire Emblem figure, including the upcoming Corrin amiibo that'll be released in July, and then you can summon a Fire Emblem illusionary hero to accompany you for a certain number of turns. You can also use a standard amiibo if you're lacking in the Fire Emblem variety, of which they're becoming increasingly rare, let me tell you that. They'll just summon a random assortment of soldiers of a random class to battle you. Overall, this game is both newbie-friendly and a nice return to form, with plenty of options for the casual players, such as the ability to rewind time as opposed to the constant resetting, as well as the return of casual mode. And you can also copy the stats of Alm or Celica onto their respective amiibos, which in itself unlocks 2 new dungeons, which are nothing remarkable, but they're a good way to get more experience, and they give you a bit more backstory about the gods that created the continent. And then you can summon a phantom of either of them, even if you're on the opposite army. So overall, Fire Emblem Echoes does a good job of using the 3DS's capabilities to make a Fire Emblem game that has a competent story that's more on par with the original Fire Emblems without feeling like it was straying too much in the trendy or over-sexual category like Fates and Awakening tried to do. Although that woman near the end that's made out of fire, that's a little bit disturbing. But apart from that, the suggestive themes are kept to a minimum this time around, so that was nice. Overall, I would say that while Echoes may feel a bit dumbed down in comparison to all of the advancements that Radiant Dawn and Fates made, it's still an extremely amazing game, and if you can look past some of the experimental choices like dungeon crawling, you'll find one of the most enjoyable story experiences I've ever played on the 3DS. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for an update once I'm able to review the rest of the DLC. And until my next video, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.